It feels like only yesterday that Dragon Links were the most hated deck in the format. Not only did they take forever to complete their combos, but they also took the worst parts of other meta decks at the time like Infernable Knights, and just ran with them. You had to deal with Dragon Link's regular stuff while also getting Buster Locked and Smoke Grenaded. Then those got banned, and guess what? It was still the best deck. It took banning LP and limiting Striker Dragon to 1 to really stop this deck from being an undisputed tier 1. But even then, some people still swear by Dragon Links being a top deck in the format. You could then imagine the cries of panic and distress when a new box was announced, heralding more Rokket support. After all, Rockets are a big part of what makes Dragon Links good, so Rokket support is basically Dragon Link support, right? Well, somehow, Pure Rokket players were thrown a bone, while managing to not add too much to Dragon Link's mass. It's not like they were bad or anything, but I just can't see Dragon Link decks bothering to try and make a ritual monster work. Instead, this new support mostly contributes towards making Rockets do what they do best. And what is that? Well, making a Borrel dragon, of course, is what I'd like to say, but Konami is still refusing to give us the good stuff from the Legendary Gold box. As endlessly salty as I am about that, I've complained about it at length in another video already, so I won't say anything more about it. Instead, a Rokket deck's purpose, if you're trying to play it pure, is to make a bunch of different Borrel boss monsters of all different extra deck types, now with a ritual Borrel added to the mix. This is a good time for a bit of a disclaimer. This deck probably isn't the absolute strongest deck that you can make that uses Rockets as an engine. It's not meant to be a Dragon Links deck that just throws every good piece of Dragon support together into a powerful mishmash of good extenders and generic extra deck monsters. Instead, it's an attempt to run a pure build that tries to remain as on theme as possible, while still making strong boards with all of your Borrel monsters. With that out of the way, let's look at this new support and see what's usable from it. Not counting the random support for magical cylinders of all things, there were 4 new cards that ended up being relevant for the Rokket deck. These are the new Ritual Monster and Spell, which of course go together, and then 2 new main deck monsters, which are Rokket Caliber and Double Disruptor Dragon. Rokket Caliber is the most generically useful among them, needing only a Dark Link monster on the field in order to special summon itself. Since it's also a tuner, you could do plays like summon it to Pisty's Link Point, before making a Borreload Savage Dragon to clear the space for Pisty's effect. It can also tribute itself to summon a Dark Dragon or Machine from the hand. This tends to mostly be used to summon the next card we'll be looking at if you happen to draw it, but it might end up seeing play in Dark Machine decks if those take off. But most of all, this card is another Rokket monster with a fairly good effect, so it's a good one to run just to have more Rokket names for all of the cards that need them. The second card helps immensely with making the Ritual and Fusion Borrel monsters actually playable. It has 2 effects and both are pretty good. The first allows you to tribute it in order to summon back 2 Rockets from your graveyard. 2 Rockets is usually the key amount for all of the extra deck monsters, and it even makes their Ritual, since we almost only play the level 4 Rockets. So this instantly makes it possible to summon one of them while also giving you some field presence. It's also Pisty's prime target in this deck, and can then get something like a Rokket Tracer back for even more advantage. Its second effect is that, when in the graveyard, it can banish itself to search either Rapid Trigger or Heavy Interlock, which are the fusion and ritual spells for your Borrels. So thanks to this, it's as easy as using Dragon's Ravine to send it to the graveyard, to then be able to choose to add either the ritual or fusion monster to your end board. With LP around, this would have been even more ridiculous, but since that card's not coming back anytime soon, it's a good card to run at 1 in order to make a pure Rokket deck work. Now for their new boss monster, Borreload Riot Dragon. One of the big problems with rituals usually is that you need both the ritual monster and the spell in your hand at once. There's also enough materials to make it. This card helps solve that problem a bit by being able to add itself to the hand from the graveyard. By targeting a Rokket or Borrel in your graveyard, which includes itself, it can destroy something in your hand or field to add itself back to your hand. This makes it a good card to discard, since you can then just destroy something that lingers on the field like a World Legacy Guard Dragon or a Dragon's Ravine. Once summoned, its effect allows you to negate or destroy a special summon, at the cost of destroying itself or a Rokket you control. This will just trigger your Rockets in the end phase, so it's not too big of a cost, and it's a powerful effect to have on a big monster like this. The ritual spell makes it even more of a presence, allowing you to destroy rockets in order to summon it. That'll make sure that you just have spare rockets on the field to destroy for its effect, so make sure you destroy at least one of them on the field while summoning it. As a bonus, it gives Riot Dragon additional protection, making it both unaffected by extra deck monsters' activated effects, and also indestructible by battle with them. This makes it so much more of a presence on the board, since your opponent probably won't be able to out it with their monsters. Altogether, for a ritual monster in a non-ritual deck, it's surprisingly playable, so points for Konami for not making it a complete joke. I mean, we know what throwing extra summoning mechanics into decks usually ends up like. Finally, I'd just like to mention Borreload Dragon. It's the face of the pack, so it must be something even stronger and cooler than the ritual, right? Maybe even some kind of Link 5 to rival even Borreload Dragon? Nope, instead it's a kind of mediocre Link 3 that sort of supports topologic monsters. While it can destroy everything on the field, it's very clunky to use, and I wouldn't bother doing so most of the time. However, it has a strange little niche use that, when it's in the graveyard, it can banish a dark monster with 3000 or more attack and then summon a topologic monster from your extra deck. Now, instead of wasting a Borrel monster on this effect, you could instead banish an opponent's monster, outing something like a Dragoon if anyone's still playing that, while also getting a monster in the process. So, putting this all together, we have a deck that can usually make a board of Spheres, Savage Dragon, and then either Furious or Riot Dragon, sometimes both, providing a lot of powerful disruption. So let's get onto the deck profile then. So here's my proposed Rokket deck idea. Again, this isn't Dragon Link, so it probably isn't the absolute most optimal version of dragons in general, but it's a deck that actually tries to make use of the rockets for their full potential of making Borrel monsters. So as for the rockets we actually use, they are 3 Rokket Tracer, 3 Silver Rokket, 3 Magna Rokket, 3 Rokket Caliber, and 1 Anis Rokket Dragon. To get the full use of this deck, you need to run a lot of rocket names, and some variety at that, to get the most use out of the field spell as possible, as well as quick launch summoning monsters you haven't used yet. This is because most of them share an effect to summon another rocket from the deck when they were destroyed on the field, so the more different ones that were destroyed in one turn, the better. Anyway, Rokket Tracer is one of the exceptions, instead destroying a card to summon a rocket from the deck, then locking you into dark extra deck monsters for the rest of the turn. You want to get to this card as soon as possible since it's free advantage, and it's also a tuner so you can make a Borreload Savage Dragon with it. Silver Rokket and Magna Rokket are both played for being level 4 rockets with a fairly decent self-destruction effect, the first removing something from your opponent's extra deck, and the second providing non-targeting removal for monsters. Anis Rokket is level 1, so it's less practical, but it can occasionally give you a negate, so it's worth having it at 1 to summon at the end of your turn. Then Rokket Caliber is here to give you tuner options, as well as occasionally being an extender sometimes if you've already used your field spell. Next you run 1 Double Disruptor Dragon. Running more can sound tempting, but honestly it's best used as a target to send with Dragon's Ravine. If you draw it, either discard it or summon it with Rokket Caliber. Even at 1, it's a great combo piece, and it will let you make either Borreload Riot or Borreload Furious Dragon while providing the materials. Then you run your Dragon extenders with 3 Absoluta, 2 Noctavision, and 1 of each of the baby Chaos Dragons. Absoluta puts your rockets to good use, and is another reason to run a lot of them, and then Noctavision helps you keep up with all of the discards by drawing a card when it's used as material. The baby Chaos Dragons go as the Chaos Space package. It's a bit clunky, especially if you draw the Dark one since it won't really have a target, but Chaos Space gives you so much card advantage that I couldn't really pass it up. It basically means that you'll be ending with another whole Borrel monster on the board, so it's worth risking the chance of drawing a Collapse Serpent just for this possible reward. If you want to run hand traps instead, feel free to cut this package, but your end boards will be a little bit weaker in exchange. Next is the Ritual package with 1 Borreload Riot Dragon, 2 Pre-Preparation of Rites, and 1 Ritual spell. So why only 2 pre-prep? Well, simply put, 3 was too much, since they're all a bit useless if you draw the Ritual spell or the monster. However, drawing the spell or the monster just means you can alter your combo a bit and still be able to make it. It adds a lot of board presence, and this is supposed to be a Rokket deck rather than just a Dragon Link deck, so it was worth making space for it for that, but as with all standard rituals, it's one hell of a cost, so make sure your hand is equipped to making it before committing too much. Then, for more Rokket support, run 3 Quick Launch, 1 Boot Sector Launch, 1 Rapid Trigger, and 3 Bayonet Punisher. Quick Launch is an obvious 3 of, as is one of the field spells since they're all such free materials. Then Rapid Trigger is there just so you can make a Furious Dragon properly. Remember that you'll probably get some summons in the end phase, as well as another free summon when your Spheres tributes itself, so if you won't have the materials during your main phase, just set this and then summon it during your opponent's turn using the materials you get during your end phase. The more, let's say, debatable choice is Bayonet Punisher at 3. To sum up this card as simply as possible, it's a quick play spell, acting as a spell speed 4 Ice Dragon's Prison that doesn't need a monster of the same type in the graveyard, while also being a DD Crow or ripping apart your opponent's extra deck. So it's hard to pass up. I'll admit it's best drawn rather than appearing in your starting hand, so you could also try it at 1, but if you'd rather not run a card that relies on other things being on your board, again this could be 3 hand traps instead. You'll just lose at least 50 cool points if you do that. Your call. Finally, to round the deck off with some dragon support spells, run 3 of the Chaos Space I mentioned earlier, 3 World Legacy Guard Dragon, and a Dragon's Ravine. Guard Dragon is great for easy pisty plays. Make a Romulus to search a Dragon's Ravine, send Double Disruptor Dragon to the graveyard, then make Pisty, move it with Guard Dragon, and then use it to revive Double Disruptor Dragon, who can then tribute itself to become 2 rockets from your graveyard. Otherwise it's just an extra material on the board, as well as a target to destroy your Rokket Tracer or a Borreload Riot Dragon in your graveyard. Both of the other field spells also serve that purpose, so make sure you're not destroying monsters unless absolutely necessary. In fact, also remember that you can destroy quick play spells with Rokket Tracer's quick effect, since they count as being on the field. Anyway, that aside, here's the extra deck. Since it's a Borrel deck, run 1 of each Borrel monster, so a Furious, a Savage, and an X-Charge, and then a Borreload and a Borrel Sword. A board of Savage and Furious backed up with something like a Spheres is honestly a decent board, giving you a Trident-like effect and an Omni-Negate. Remember that Furious Dragon will be unaffected by your opponent's extra deck activated effects, so it can be kinda hard to out sometimes. Also, when going for this card, make sure you destroy a rocket from the field with an end phase summon effect, so that you'll have something to destroy as its effect. It also gives Bayonet Punisher its strongest effect, so go for it if you have that in your hand. Borreload X-Charge Dragon is the worst of all of them, only really giving you a situational revival for something like a Borreload Furious or Borreload Riot Dragon, but it gives Bayonet Punisher some back row removal, so it still has its uses. We all know Borrel Sword already, and Borreload is a pretty good non-targeting, non-destruction piece of removal. You then have your combo pieces with Striker Dragon, Romulus, Pisty, and Spheres. They're very standard inclusions, so just remember to make Romulus and, if you can, Spheres before using Rokket Tracer's effect, which would lock you out of them. Finally, Delingerous Dragon and Quad Borrel Dragon are mostly used just for going second, as they help with link climbing into a Borrel Sword or a Borreload. Unchained Abomination is a fairly good link to make. It's a dark type, it can trigger off of your various destruction effects, and you can target your rockets to trigger their self-destruction effects. Finally, for a bit of a topologic package, you can run 1 Borrel Code, 1 Trisbana, and a Zoroboros. None of them are really that good, but in later turns they can help you even things out a bit. Borrel Code can also out something like a Dragoon if you get it in the graveyard, which might just be its best use. Keep it in mind if someone uses Dogmatica Maximus against you. Otherwise, you can just replace these cards by more of the good ones like an extra Spheres. Now for some options, like I said before, you can just try and put some hand traps instead of the Bayonet Punishers or the Chaos Space package. You could also try running some Dragon Shrines, since there are quite a few good targets in this deck. Finally, some people insist that Squib Draw is good, since it'll trigger a rocket in the end phase while drawing 2 cards. If you're going for a slower version of the deck that thrives off keeping up advantage instead of making impressive end boards, I could see this working, but that's not really the direction I took with this deck. Finally, to address the elephant in the room, yes, this deck's support was clearly made with Borrel End Dragon in mind, which Konami refuses to give us. So as soon as it gets released, throw it into this deck and it immediately gets better. Now for some replays. Like Dragon Links, it's a deck with which you'll need to improvise with every hand, so instead of showing standard combos, I'll be showing you some test hands. If you've been enjoying the video so far, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. For this first replay, we start with pre-preparation of Rites. It's not usually worth going for Borreload Riot Dragon unless you draw either it, the ritual spell, or pre-prep, so if you don't have any of those, just go for Furious Dragon instead. Quick Launch usually makes all of your extenders live, and then Noctovision and Absoluta Dragon refill your hand. Making Romulus early is good for avoiding the Dark Lock, and makes Pisty easier to use by pointing it to a Striker Dragon. 2 rockets in hand gets full use out of Boot Sector, so since we can, it's a good time to make a Riot Dragon. The Chaos Dragons help you keep up advantage for Dragon Ravine's discard, letting you send a Double Disruptor Dragon to then bring it back as a Pisty. It tributes itself for 2 materials, and then can banish itself to search the fusion spell. For its fusion you can use your non-level monsters, since those are less useful for stuff like Savage Dragon. Make your remaining monsters accept Tracer into your spheres, and then pop the field spell to get another monster back in order to make your Synchro and then equip the Romulus you just used as a material. This second hand shows you just how strong Chaos Space can be. Since you have a Link 1 in this deck, it's easy to get the Chaos Dragons into the graveyard to trigger their effects to search another one. With 2 rockets in the hand, Boot Sector launches 2 more materials, and then you get access to Tracer through Quick Launch. Chaos Space can then also banish itself to draw a card, which happens to be Double Disruptor Dragon here. Since Wyver Buster is added back to the hand as part of the Chaos Space combo, it's a perfect discard for Dragon's Ravine, since it's a hard once per turn anyway, so making Romulus to search it and then a Spheres while you're not locked into Dark types yet is perfect. Double Disruptor is 2 more materials, and then you're free to use Tracer's destruction effect since you've summoned everything else that isn't Dark. Send Riot Dragon with Ravine, which can then destroy the Ravine to add itself back to hand. Now the Double Disruptor can search the Ritual spell, and you're free to use your remaining materials to make a Savage Dragon, a Riot Dragon, and then get back a Rocket Tracer in the end phase. Now here's a hand with Bayonet Punisher to show how it can affect your plays. Just pretend Auto Rocket is any other rocket monster since it ends up not mattering. It's best to make Romulus with Noctovision and Absoluta, since neither of them can be made into Pisty or Striker Dragon. Doing so gets 3 cards into your hand, setting up the rest of your combos. Since we have 2 Tracers, it's fine to discard one with Ravine to send your Double Disruptor. You can then banish it to search your fusion spell, which is the strongest when combined with Bayonet Punisher. You can now get your summons off of the field spell, making a Pisty to bring back the banished Double Disruptor, who tributes itself for even more materials. You can now make a Spheres and a Furious Dragon, before locking yourself into Darks with your Tracer to get even more materials out for a Borreload Savage Dragon. You now have the bounce from Spheres, a Trident with a spare rocket as material from Furious, and an Omni Negate from Savage Dragon, and then you set Bayonet Punisher for an unrespondable, non-targeting banish that also takes 3 cards from your opponent's extra deck. Finally, here's a hand where you use Guard Dragon's effect for good use. Start with pre-preparation of rights to get your Ritual monster and also the spell so that you won't draw them later, and then quick launch a Tracer to be able to summon an Noctovision. You can now make a Romulus, which gives you Dragon's Ravine and a draw of Absoluta. To make that live, you can now use your Guard Dragon on Tracer, and then use the Absoluta and Romulus to make a Spheres. Pisty is now on the board, but before using it, send a Riot Dragon from your hand with Ravine to send a Double Disruptor. Add it back to your hand for free by destroying Ravine, and then move Pisty with Guard Dragon to be able to revive Double Disruptor for 2 more materials. You can now start to make all of your Borrel boss monsters, getting even more materials on the board with Tracer, ending on a powerful board of boss monsters that even has an extra Tracer to be used as cost, and gain even more advantage. So, what did you think? Will you be trying to play Rockets Pure? Or do you prefer just Dragon Links in general? Tell me in the comments down below. And while you're there, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching!